All right, so we're going to look real quick at the Pathfinder tools. You'll have to deal with the math today because I'm recording in class. So the Pathfinder tools are used to combine shapes into single objects. Okay, so in order for them to be accessible, we have to have some shapes. So I'm going to build just a few different things, get you an idea of what they look like, and I'm going to change the fill colors just so it's real easy to tell what's what. So I've got these two shapes, a circle and a rectangle, and you'll notice in the layers panel, the rectangle is behind the circle or the ellipse, okay? And so this is going to be sort of the basis of where we work from. So when we look at Pathfinder tools, the tools themselves are up here, and you notice right now they're faded out, and it says create compound shape. Now, the reason why it's faded out right now is simply because I only have one object selected. You cannot pathfind or create compound shapes with only one shape built. Okay, so once I select two of them, I have access to this. Now, the other thing to think about is that because it's create compound shape, you do have to have two shapes, not just two paths. So if I were to come in and design a line with the pen tool, and I selected it and one of these shapes, while it will let you pathfind and create compound shape, it's not going to give you the effect that you want. So we're going to get rid of that. You're going to want to work with these shapes. And if you look at our other video where we talked about expanding shapes using the modify path and then convert to outline or convert to path, convert to raw path, those values to turn regular lines into shapes, that works as well. So as we work through this, let's look at what they do. So underneath this, if I click the down arrow, there are four options that it gives you. The first one is union, and this is pretty straightforward. It's take these shapes, mash them together, and create a single shape with a uniform outline. So when I create union, you notice I get one big shape. And you'll notice over here in the layers panel, it's created a compound shape. And it still has each of these individually built, but together they're now one piece. And I can take and fill that piece with whatever color I want. And it just creates a single shape that I can work with. This also lets you look if I drop this into its own layer, so we can take a look at this, it also lets me look at the outlines. So you notice it has a single outline now. So what's really nice about this is that when it creates these shapes, these compound shapes, you can actually undo it, okay? So if we come back up here, oh, wrong button. So these shapes, while you can look at them individually, they still won't let you work on them separately. They are now basically a single giant shape, okay? So that's something to think about. Now, what's really nice is that you can modify the original shapes by themselves. So you'll notice I modified the edge of this, and my compound shape is now modified as well. I can go back and look at those outlines, and it's modified that shape. Okay, so these compound shapes let you build things together as you work. So let's look at another example. We're going to create another rectangle, and we'll make it we'll make it bright green. We'll create let's just grab a polygon this time, and we'll fill that one with red. So again, they stand out against each other. So the first one we looked at was union. The second option is subtract. And you'll notice it's got dark in the back and this light in the front. So this is subtract front or minus front. And what it's saying is that whichever shape is on top in your layers panel, which is in front, it's going to be removed from the shape in the back. I'm going to undo this. And actually, I'm going to duplicate this so we have two sets. And what I'm going to do, is this. We're going to shrink this down just a little bit. Shrink these down just a little bit just to make them fit on the screen a little bit better. But this one, we'll go ahead and subtract front. You'll notice it cuts away this because this is on top in the layer. Now I'm going to take this one. I'm going to modify. I'm going to modify this shape to take this rectangle and bring it on front. So now my rectangle is on top of my hexagon. And if I do the same action, subtract, it's now cutting away that rectangle. So subtract has to do with the topmost item being removed from the items beneath it. Okay, and that's something you can do with multiple pieces as you go. So let's look at the next option. So again, we've got ourselves a rectangle. Fill it red. We'll grab ourselves, say, a little star this time. And we'll fill that one purple. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead, shrink this down a little bit, and duplicate it again. So on this one, our third option is intersection. And so if you again look at the image, you'll notice up here, it's got blanks except where the two things overlap. So fairly obviously, click. All it leaves you with is where they were both existing. So it's sort of cutting out just where they both lived. Now the last one is difference. And you notice it's got this opposite of intersection. It's solid on the outside and empty where they intersect. So click that, and suddenly you have a compound shape where they touched, where they were overlapping, that's what's gone. So these Pathfinder tools are used to build these interesting compound shapes. And what's most important is that when you look at the outlines, it can create single outlines. Now this one, look at that. It's still got different pieces. So this one is much harder to deal with when we talk about building things, for example, our vinyl cutout, because this shape creates these extra lines. The big thing to remember, and what these are really useful for, is merging shapes together to create a single pattern. So for example, let's say I built a little rectangle and then I grabbed my triangle tool and we go like this. I'm going to shrink that down a little bit. Alt and blow that up. Alt again, blow that up. So I've built this little tree shape, but you'll notice it's still all these different pieces. But if I select them all and, for example, union them, I now have one object that is a single tree shape. And if I go in and change my outlines, I just have that one outline, which is what we need when we're building things like our vinyl cutouts. We have to have a single outline for the laser or the knife to follow. Because if we have a whole bunch of individual pieces, for example, if we look at this, the laser or the knife is going to cut every single one of these lines, which isn't what we want when we're actually building pieces together. So the biggest things to remember is that when we're building these shapes, the order of the layers matters, okay? The order of the layers always matters in this. You have to make sure that the object that you want to work with is either on top or on bottom, depending on what you're picking. So for example, I'm going to change the colors on these just so that they are a little easier to tell apart. So give them all a little bit different colors. So if I want to work with just these two shapes, I can, for example, subtract their differences, get that oddball shape. If I want to work with just these two, I could union those, okay? And then here, let's say I need to make sure that this goes away. If I take this and intersect it, whoops, nothing intersected, difference, there we go. So we get this weird difference. So think about this. You're going to have to play with these shapes to build the proper set of outlines. And always remember to come back to your layer panel and look at the outlines to see what the actual computer sees, because that's what's going to be most important when you're creating your outlines for things like a vinyl cut.